The Plain of Jars is a megalithic archaeological landscape in Laos. It consists of thousands of stone jars scattered across the central plain. The jars are arranged in clusters ranging from 1 up to 400. These jars are huge, weighing a ton or more each, with some of them having stone lids still in place. There are over 400 different site locations for the jars. It was concluded in 1930 that the jars were associated with prehistoric burial practices. This has been determined because excavation has turned up human remains. Researchers determined that jars were put in place as early as 660 BC. The jars vary in height and diameter between 1 meter and 3 meters, or 3 foot to 9 foot, and are all made from rock. Their shape is cylindrical, with the bottom always wider than the top. The stone jars are undecorated, with the exception of a single jar at Site 1. This jar has a human frogman carved on the exterior. Since most of the jars have lip rims, it is thought that the jars originally supported lids. Although few stone lids have been recorded, this suggests that the bulk of the lids were fashioned from perishable materials. Stone lids with animal carvings have been found at a few sites. The carvings are thought to depict monkeys, tigers, and frogs. A cave at Site 1 is a natural limestone formation with an opening to the northwest and 2 man-made holes at the top. These holes are thought to be chimneys for a crematorium. They concluded that the Plain of Jars was an Iron Age burial site. Inside the jars she found, embedded in black organic soil, colored glass beads, burnt teeth, and bone fragments, sometimes from more than one individual. The bones and teeth inside the jars show signs of cremation. Variation in practices of cremation inside jars and secondary burial outside jars have proven difficult to explain. The cremated remains seem to mainly belong to adolescents. The local legends of the Lao people say that the jars were used by a race of giants to brew and store huge amounts of alcohol. Okay, here is where the real conspiracy comes in. Between May 1964 and the summer of 1969, the Plain of Jars was heavily bombed by the U.S. Air Force, operating against North Vietnamese and Lao Communist forces. The U.S. Air Force dropped more bombs on the Plain of Jars than it dropped during the entirety of World War II. This included 262 million anti-personnel cluster bombs. An estimated 80 million of these did not explode and remain a deadly threat to the population to this day. With a large quantity of unexploded bombs in the area, especially cluster bombs, evidence of the bombing raids can be seen in the form of broken or displaced jars and many bomb craters. Now, sightseeing on the Plain of Jars can only be done safely on cleared and marked pathways. So obviously it's very strange that the military would do that, and they continue to duck questions about it to this day. The Dropa stones are said to be a series of at least 716 circular stone discs, dating back 12,000 years. On the discs there are tiny hieroglyph-like markings so small they could only be read with a magnifying glass. Each disc is claimed to measure up to 1 foot in diameter and have 2 grooves, originating from the hole in the center, in the shape of a double spiral. The hieroglyph-like markings are in these small grooves. The discs were discovered in 1938 in the mountains on the border between China and Tibet. A professor of archaeology at Beijing University and his students were on an expedition to explore a series of caves in the Himalayan mountains. The caves had been artificially carved to be a system of tunnels and underground storerooms. The walls were squared and glazed as if cut into the mountain with great heat. Inside the cave system, the professor and his team found interesting rock art which depicted figures with round helmets. Engraved in the rock were also the sun, moon, earth, and stars connected by groups of pea-sized dots. Further inside the cave, the team found the collection of stone discs, most of them half buried in the floor of the cave. At the time of the discovery, the cave area was still inhabited by 2 tribes known as the Hams and the Dropas. This Dropa tribe is said to be where the discs originated. They were said to be an alien race stranded on Earth after their ship crash-landed. Anthropologists have apparently been unable to categorize either tribe into any known race. They are neither Chinese, Mongol, or Tibetan. They are yellow-skinned with thin bodies and disproportionately large heads, corresponding to the skeletal remains found in the caves in 1938. They have sparse hair on their bodies, large eyes, with an average height of 4 foot tall. The discs were labeled along with other finds of the expedition and stored away at Beijing University for 20 years, during which deciphering attempts were unsuccessful. When the discs were closely examined by Dr. Tsum of Beijing around 1958, he allegedly managed to decipher the hieroglyphic characters after 4 years of study, which, he claimed, told the story of a spacecraft that crash-landed in the area of the cave and that the ship contained the Dropa people. One of the discs apparently said the following: "The Dropa came down from the clouds in their aircraft. Our men, women, and children hid in the caves 10 times before sunrise. When at last we understood the sign language of the Dropas, we realized that the newcomers had peaceful intentions." Another section expressed regret by the Hams that the aliens' craft had crash-landed in such a remote and inaccessible mountain range, and that there had been no way to building a new one to enable the Dropas to return to their own planet. Dr. Tsum is said to have published his findings in 1962 in a professional journal, and was subsequently ridiculed and met with disbelief. Shortly afterward, he is said to have gone to Japan in a self-imposed exile, where he died not long after he completed his manuscripts of his work. In 1968, the Dropa stones apparently came to the attention of a Russian scientist, who republished the findings of Tsum and conducted tests on the discs that revealed some very peculiar properties. The stones contained high concentrations of cobalt, which would have been too hard for the primitive people to be able to carve the lettering. As recorded in the Soviet magazine Sputnik, when testing a disc, a surprising rhythm was recorded, as if they had been once electrically charged or had functioned as electrical conductors. Supposedly, there was an Australian engineer who in 1974 visited the Banpo Museum in China, where he saw 2 of the Dropa stones. When he inquired about the discs, the manager could tell him nothing, but permitted him to take one in his hands and photograph them up close. He claims that in his photos the hieroglyphs cannot be seen as they have been hidden by the flash from the camera and have also deteriorated. By 1994, the discs and the manager had disappeared from the museum. In 1994, a German scientist visited China and the Banpo Museum in Xi'an, where they were told that the director's superiors had ordered the disc destroyed and that, officially, they do not recognize their existence. They found out that the Chinese government do not have any official records of a Dropa tribe whatsoever in China. Okay, so that's the video. Thank you for watching, and if you like it, please subscribe.